Sometimes there comes a moment in a person's life, a moment so quiet, so subtle, that even the universe seems to hold its breath when something inside them whispers, "This cannot be all there is." It doesn't arrive with thunder. It doesn't descend with angels. It slips in through the cracks of an ordinary day, through a gaze out of a window, through a sigh at work, through a heartbeat that suddenly feels heavier than usual. And in that instant, everything you've been carrying, everything you've been chasing, everything you've been living for, trembles. You look at your life, and instead of seeing a path, you see a stage. Instead of seeing purpose, you see movement. Instead of seeing meaning, you see a pattern you've been repeating without ever asking why. People call it burnout. Some call it a crisis. But what if it is neither? What if it is an awakening trying to break through the layers of your routine? What if something inside you, something ancient, something wild, something unbroken, is trying to rise after years of being silent? You see, every human being eventually reaches a threshold where the story they were handed stops working. The script they memorized no longer feels like their own voice. The mask begins to itch. The armor becomes too heavy. And the life that once felt tolerable suddenly feels like a performance someone else wrote for you. In that moment, your soul does something revolutionary. It rebels, quietly, softly, but undeniably. It begins to tug at the edges of the life you've built and asks the question you've spent decades avoiding: is this truly who you are? And when that question rises, you can feel it like a shift in gravity. Food tastes different. Conversations feel hollow. Achievements you once celebrated feel oddly weightless. The things you once desired no longer spark the fire they used to. Most people try to run from this feeling. They drown it in distraction. They try to resuscitate old desires. They chase new pleasures. They try to pretend nothing is changing, that they can return to the rhythm of their old life. But once the awakening begins, nothing fits the same way again. Because this is not the collapse of meaning, it is the collapse of illusion. And illusions fight when you try to leave them. You begin to realize how much of your life has been spent following scripts written by parents, society, expectations, culture, fear. You begin to notice how many choices you made not because you wanted them, but because you felt you were supposed to want them. You start to feel the weight of invisible rules. Work harder, be productive, be impressive, be responsible, be normal. And somewhere along the line you forgot to be alive. But something inside you remembers. That stirring you feel is not emptiness, it is not loss, it is not purposelessness. It is the first breath of freedom. It is the first spark of a self that has been asleep beneath layers of expectations. It is the beginning of the moment when your life stops being a performance and starts becoming an act of creation. When you begin to awaken, the world around you doesn't change, but your perception of it does. Things that once felt permanent reveal their fragility. Things that once felt important shrink into insignificance. And the things you ignored, the small, quiet, ineffable moments, begin to glow with a strange magnetic significance. A breeze through a window, a pause in conversation. A single moment of silence becomes richer than all the noise of your old life. This phase is disorienting because you are standing between two worlds. One world is familiar but false, the other is true but unknown. And human beings fear the unknown, even when the unknown is the only place their soul can breathe. You may feel lost, but the truth is you are not lost at all. You are shedding. The version of you that lived for approval, validation, praise, certainty, that version cannot survive the awakening. It dissolves. And what emerges is something raw, real, unfiltered. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. It writhes not because it is dying, but because it is growing. The discomfort is not punishment, it is transformation. Your mind feels uncertain because it cannot understand what your soul already knows, that you are not here to mimic other people's paths. You are here to create your own. In these moments of awakening, life tests you. It removes the things that were once distractions. It exposes the emptiness of achievements. It unravels relationships that were built on convenience rather than truth. It quiets the noise of the world so you can hear your own mind again. And when that quiet arrives, it can feel terrifying. Most people panic when they feel this silence. They think something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. The silence is where your real voice lives. The silence is where your real desires begin to speak. But you must be willing to listen, not with your mind, but with a deeper intelligence, the intelligence that guided you long before you learned language, long before society shaped you. You begin to realize that meaning is not something given to you. Meaning is something you choose. Purpose is not a sign from outside. Purpose rises from within. And when that realization dawns, the world shifts, the rules dissolve, the boundaries expand, every moment becomes fertile with possibility. Because you are no longer living to meet expectations, you are living to explore existence itself. This awakening is not comfortable. It never is. Real transformation rarely begins with joy. It begins with disruption. Something cracks, something breaks, something falls apart. And it is through those fractures that the light enters. Think of the caterpillar. It doesn't become a butterfly by improving itself. It dissolves into a dark, formless soup. Everything it thought it was melts away. And only then, in the darkness, does something extraordinary begin to take shape. You are in that dark, formless phase. And although it feels like uncertainty, it is actually potential. It is the moment before a new identity is born. It is the moment when the universe pauses, holds its breath, and waits for you to choose who you will become next. And understand this, not everyone reaches this stage. Many people live their entire lives asleep inside their stories. They never question the script. They never rebel against the expectations. They never feel the discomfort of awakening because they never allow themselves to outgrow their roles. But you are not one of them. The very fact that you are feeling this shift means something extraordinary is happening inside you. The life you have outgrown is falling away. And something vast, something alive, something fiercely authentic is trying to emerge. Do not run. Do not numb it. Do not rush to fill the void. Stay. Listen. Let the old dissolve. Let the new gather strength. You are not ending, you are beginning. And this beginning will demand courage. Because the world you're stepping into won't offer ready-made answers. It won't give you scripts or instructions. It will give you something far more powerful, the freedom to create yourself from scratch. And that freedom, raw, untamed, limitless, is the very thing your soul has been waiting for. The freedom to create yourself from scratch is unsettling because it demands that you let go of the identity that once protected you. It requires stepping into a space where you no longer have the comfort of certainty, where the path does not unfold until you take the step. And in this unfamiliar openness, you begin to sense something extraordinary. Your life is not a continuation of what you've been. It is a canvas waiting for what you dare to become. As the old layers peel away, you start noticing the small impulses that rise from within, impulses you once ignored because they did not fit the narrative you were trying to maintain. A desire for silence, a craving for solitude, a pull toward something unknown. These impulses are not distractions, they are the compass of your becoming. They are signals from the deeper self, guiding you toward a life that aligns with your truth, rather than your conditioning. You begin to feel the difference between what drains you and what restores you. People who once felt familiar now feel distant because your spirit no longer resonates with the frequency they occupy. Habits that once numbed you now feel suffocating. Environments that once defined you now feel too small, too limiting, too predictable. And instead of forcing yourself to fit back into these spaces, something within you begins to quietly withdraw. You are not isolating yourself. You are making room for a new version of yourself to emerge. In this space of transformation, time behaves differently. Some days feel heavy, as though you're carrying the weight of an entire lifetime of choices. Other days feel strangely light, as if you're drifting through a world you can no longer take seriously. You find yourself observing life rather than participating in it, as though you're watching an old film you've already outgrown. This detachment is not apathy. It is clarity. It is the moment when you stop being entangled in the drama of your own story and start seeing it for what it really is, a narrative you can rewrite at any moment. But with this clarity comes responsibility. Once you realize that you are the creator of your experience, you can no longer blame the world for your dissatisfaction. You can no longer hide behind excuses, expectations, or old wounds. You stand face to face with the truth that you must build meaning rather than search for it. And in that truth lies the birth of a new strength, a strength that does not come from force, but from alignment. This alignment begins quietly. You start making small choices that feel sincere rather than strategic. You move toward what feels alive rather than what feels acceptable. You begin to listen to the subtle inner movements that are guiding you toward a deeper kind of existence. You realize the world does not need you to be impressive. It needs you to be authentic. And authenticity requires stripping away every false layer until only the truth remains. As you move through this phase, you begin to understand that growth does not happen in dramatic leaps. It happens in the silent decisions you make moment by moment. The decision to walk away from what no longer resonates, the decision to speak honestly even when your voice trembles, the decision to honor your inner knowing even when no one else understands. These decisions accumulate and slowly carve a new identity, a self that is no longer shaped by fear or expectation, but by awareness. Awareness changes everything. It sharpens your perception until you begin to see life not as a series of obligations, but as an unfolding mystery. Notice patterns you once overlooked. You sense energies you once dismissed. You feel the undercurrents beneath conversations, relationships, environments. This sensitivity is not a burden. It is your awakening sense of direction. It allows you to navigate the world with intuition rather than effort, with clarity rather than confusion. The deeper you move into this transformation, the more you begin to recognize the power you carry. Not the power to control the world, but the power to shape your place within it. The power to respond rather than react. The power to choose rather than obey. The power to rewrite your narrative, even if the past tries to pull you back. You begin to understand that becoming yourself is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of liberation. In this liberation, you will lose people, not because you wronged them, but because you are no longer the version of yourself that belonged to their world. Some will try to pull you back to the familiar roles you once played. Some will resent your growth because it forces them to confront their own stagnation. And some will simply fade, unable to walk alongside the path you are stepping onto. Let them go. Your evolution is not a betrayal. It is a necessary transformation. As the old circles break apart, new paths open. You begin to attract people whose presence feels like oxygen. Conversations that nourish your mind, ideas that ignite your spirit, experiences that expand your awareness. This is the natural consequence of aligning with your truth. The universe rearranges itself around your frequency, not through magic, but through resonance. What you are becoming begins to shape what you attract. There will be moments during this transition when you feel the urge to return to the old life simply because it was familiar. Nostalgia will whisper to you. Fear will call you by your old name. Doubt will rise like a shadow trying to convince you that you are not ready for this transformation. But the truth is that you are no longer capable of going back. The person who lived that life is dissolving, and no amount of comfort can resurrect who you used to be. Growth is irreversible once awakened. As you move forward, you begin to notice the subtle emergence of a new inner landscape, a landscape shaped not by obligation, but by curiosity, not by pressure, but by possibility. You feel an opening within you, a widening of perception, a softening of old wounds, a sense of expansion that whispers there is something more waiting for you. This expansion is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It is the natural state of a mind freed from the cage of its old identity, and slowly you begin to step into this expanded space. You start living from a deeper presence, a grounded awareness that does not depend on external validation. You begin to move through life with a quiet confidence, not because you know the path, but because you trust yourself to walk it. You begin to feel connected to your inner world in a way that makes the outer world less intimidating. You no longer chase meaning, you generate it through the way you live, the way you choose, the way you exist. This new way of being unfolds gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day you wake up and realize that the heaviness that once accompanied you is lifted. The confusion that once clouded you has thinned. The fear that once restricted you has softened. You have stepped into a new version of yourself, not through force, but through surrender. Not through control, but through awareness. You begin to recognize that your life is no longer defined by the expectations you once carried. It is defined by the possibilities you are now willing to embrace. You begin to operate from a deeper intelligence, a sense of alignment that guides you without needing explanation. You start to live not from the mind's narratives, but from the soul's intuition. This is the shift that marks the true beginning of transformation. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is steady, silent, and profound. And as this transformation continues to unfold, you move further into the uncharted terrain of who you are becoming. The path ahead is not mapped, yet it feels strangely familiar, as though your deeper self has walked it 1,000 times in silence before your conscious mind ever caught up. The transition from who you were to who you are becoming is not a single moment. It is an unfolding, a continuous emergence, a journey into the untapped depths of your own existence. And so, as that inner shift deepens, quietly, subtly, but unmistakably, you begin to realize that what you once mistook for stability was only repetition, a looping echo of the same emotions, the same reactions, the same self-created cages that pretended to be comfort. You see now that most people spend their entire lives circling the same emotional landscapes, calling it a journey while never moving more than a few inches from where they started. But something inside you refuses to circle anymore. A quiet rebellion rises, not violent, not loud, but steady, like a tide that doesn't need permission to reach the shore. You start noticing that the world no longer speaks to you in the language it used to. The noise that once distracted you now sounds hollow, meaningless, almost comical. The dramas that once hooked you feel like flimsy cardboard props. The expectations that used to weigh on your shoulders collapse like dust. It's not that life has simplified. If anything, it has become more mysterious, more uncertain. But you start to feel strangely comfortable in that uncertainty. You don't reach for the old anchors anymore because some instinct tells you those anchors were actually chains. And in this shift, you begin to sense that the true fear you carried wasn't of the unknown, but of your own potential. You were terrified of the magnitude of what you could become if you stopped holding yourself back. You feared the responsibility of greatness, the weight of authenticity, the intensity of your own awareness. Because once you see truth, you can't unsee it. Once you awaken, you can't go back to sleep. And once you realize you were made for something far beyond survival, the idea of going back to the person you were becomes impossible. You feel your old identity dissolving, almost like a second skin peeling away. The stories you used to tell about yourself crumble. The labels lose meaning. The old versions of you, obedient, afraid, confused, seem like ghosts you no longer recognize, and simultaneously something new is trying to emerge. something raw and unfiltered. But it doesn't come with instructions. They won't fear your evolution because they are evolving too. But despite this, a part of the journey will feel solitary, not lonely, solitary. Because no matter how many people surround you, no one else can take the steps that belong to you. No one can make the decisions for you. No one can face the shadows you've avoided. No one can navigate the labyrinth of your own inner world. And surprisingly, you start embracing this solitude. You start valuing it. You start realizing that the most important transformations of your life will always happen alone, away from noise, away from crowds, away from the distractions that once numbed your awareness. And as you continue on this inner path, something remarkable begins to happen. Your perception expands. You start noticing layers of reality that most people don't see. The subtleties of emotion, the invisible patterns behind human behavior, the hidden motivations behind actions, the unspoken truths behind words. It's as if the world becomes transparent. People reveal themselves without trying. Situations expose their true nature instantly, and you begin to operate from a deeper intelligence, not intellectual, but intuitive. This intuition becomes your new compass. You stop needing validation. You stop seeking permission. You stop waiting for the world to tell you who you are. The noise outside gets quieter, and the voice inside grows louder, clearer, sharper. It guides you not with fear, but with a calm inevitability, like a river flowing toward the ocean. And in this clarity, you recognize something profound. You are not behind in life. You are not lost. You are not late. You are exactly where you were meant to be. Every detour, every heartbreak, every dark night of the soul was part of your alignment, not your failure. You were being prepared, not punished. Prepared for a version of life you could not have entered with the mindset you once had. And that realization changes everything. You start making different choices, not out of desperation, but out of awareness. You stop chasing what drains you. You stop entertaining what confuses you. You stop forcing what feels wrong because you've tasted something better. Clarity, alignment, self-respect, inner peace. Once you taste that, you cannot go back to chaos. Your energy becomes selective. Your boundaries become natural, not rigid, not defensive, natural. You begin saying no without guilt, yes without fear, and goodbye without collapsing. You start protecting your inner world the way someone guards a sacred flame. You begin trusting that the things meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself. And the things not meant for you will fall away no matter how tightly you hold on. You start realizing that life doesn't respond to your fear. It responds to your frequency. When you shift internally, everything external eventually rearranges. People who match your past fall away. And those aligned with your future appear. Opportunities shift, energy shifts, momentum shifts. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But then suddenly, everything feels different, and this difference is not accidental. It's the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. And as that new alignment subtly rearranges the architecture of your reality, you begin to feel the strange but undeniable sensation that life is no longer happening to you. It is happening through you. You realize that the external world is not the dictator of your inner state, but a reflection of it. You see that every emotion, every choice, every belief sends ripples out into the fabric of existence and returns to you as experiences, opportunities, and lessons. This recognition feels both empowering and terrifying because it removes the illusion of helplessness. You can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer blame fate. You can no longer wait for someone else to save you. You understand now that you were always the one steering the direction of your life, even when you didn't know it. But this awareness doesn't make the journey easier. If anything, it makes it more demanding. Because once you awaken to your own power, life begins to test whether you're ready to use it. Doors that once opened effortlessly now challenge you to step into your strength before granting access. Situations that once felt simple now present deeper layers that require your honesty, your emotional courage, your patience. People who once fit into your life seamlessly now force you to choose between your growth and your comfort. And every choice becomes a declaration of who you are becoming. But instead of resisting these challenges, you start facing them with a quiet confidence. You no longer crumble at difficulty the way you once did. You no longer misinterpret obstacles as signs to give up. You see them as catalysts, pressure that shapes you, discomfort that sharpens you, friction that solidifies you. You begin to understand that growth requires resistance. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Seeds break open in darkness. You stop living in the past because you finally understand that nothing new grows in old soil. You stop waiting for the future because you realize the future is only shaped by what you choose right now. You begin to inhabit the present fully, not as an idea, but as a way of being. Conversations feel deeper, moments feel richer, emotions feel clearer. You begin sensing life in ways you never have before, noticing the subtle symphonies hidden within silence, the meaning embedded in small details, the lessons woven into every encounter. And this expanded awareness brings with it a kind of compassion that surprises even you. You start understanding people not through their words, but through their wounds. Their anger reveals their pain. Their distance reveals their fear. Their harshness reveals their protection. And suddenly, the world doesn't look as cruel as it once did. It looks injured. Not evil, just wounded. Not heartless, just guarded. And while this compassion doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment, it does mean you stop taking things personally. You stop internalizing the emotional storms of others. You stop letting their chaos become yours. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. And because of this, you begin living with a kind of emotional discipline that would have been impossible for the old you. You stop reacting immediately. You stop being triggered by every small discomfort. You begin responding instead of reacting, observing instead of absorbing. That shift alone elevates your entire life. You start making choices aligned with your higher self instead of your wounded self. You begin breaking generational patterns simply by refusing to repeat them. And with every step, you move further away from who you were and deeper into who you were destined to become. But even as you rise, you feel the weight of another truth. Growth comes with loss. Not the dramatic, grief-filled loss you feared, but a subtle shedding. Old patterns dissolve, old relationships fade, old desires fall away. And while a part of you aches for what once was, another part recognizes that you are not losing anything essential. You are shedding everything that no longer resonates with the frequency of your becoming. And in this shedding, you discover a profound freedom, the freedom of not needing to be understood. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop proving yourself to those who only see you through the lens of your past. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You start honoring your truth even when your voice shakes. You start choosing yourself even when it feels unfamiliar. You start walking away from anything that asks you to betray your own soul. This shift marks a turning point, because once you choose yourself at that depth, life begins responding in extraordinary ways. Opportunities that felt distant begin moving toward you. Ideas spark. Clarity sharpens. People aligned with your growth cross your path in unexpected ways. Synchronicities multiply. You begin feeling guided by something larger than yourself, not as superstition, but as resonance, as inner knowing, as alignment, and through all of this, your relationship with fear changes. You stop fighting it. You stop seeing it as an enemy. You start recognizing fear as a signal of expansion, a doorway to the next version of yourself. Every time fear arises, instead of retreating, you lean in. You walk toward it. You listen to what it's trying to protect. And in that listening, fear softens. It transforms from a prison guard into a guide. And you realize fear was never there to stop you. It was there to prepare you. As you move through this transformation, something else becomes clear. The person you once prayed to become is no longer distant. They aren't a dream. They aren't a fantasy. They are forming quietly within you, piece by piece, choice by choice, moment by moment. You start seeing glimpses of them in the way you speak, in the way you hold yourself, in the way you handle discomfort, in the way you honor your truth. And then, almost unexpectedly, you reach a moment that feels like a threshold, a moment where the accumulation of everything you've learned, everything you have released, everything you've healed suddenly converges into one truth. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to who you were before the world taught you to shrink. You are reclaiming your voice, reclaiming your intuition, reclaiming your worth, reclaiming your power. You are remembering the version of you that existed before fear was taught to you, before doubt was planted in you, before the world convinced you to forget your own magnitude. At this threshold, you feel something crack open inside you, not painfully, but powerfully. It feels like the final wall collapsing, the last barrier dissolving, the moment where the past no longer has the power to define you. You feel a surge of clarity, a pulse of strength, a deep inhale that tastes like freedom. And you realize that the life you are stepping into is not the continuation of your old story. It is an entirely new chapter written by a version of you finally understands their own potential. And this understanding brings with it the one thing your soul has been seeking from the very beginning: integrity, the alignment between who you are and how you live, the unity of thought, action, intention, and truth, the state where your inner world and outer world finally match. For the first time, you feel whole. For the first time, you feel awake. For the first time, you feel ready, not because life has become easier, but because you have become stronger, clearer, deeper, wiser. You have become the kind of person who can walk through fire without collapsing, who can face uncertainty without losing themselves, who can stand alone without feeling lonely. And now, standing in the fullness of that transformation, you understand something profound. Your story was never about breaking. It was always about becoming. It was always about shedding everything that dimmed your light. It was always about outgrowing versions of you that were too small for your soul. It was always about transforming pain into wisdom, confusion into clarity, and fear into power. It was always about remembering who you were meant to be. And now, as you step into that truth, fully, unapologetically, powerfully, you realize the journey was worth every dark night, every ending, every challenge, every moment of doubt. Because this version of you, the one standing here, the one who finally knows their own strength, the one who no longer fears their own potential, this is the version of you the world has been waiting to meet. This is the version of you who will shape the rest of your life. This is the beginning of everything.